Hey guys, it's Cece and welcome to my December wrap-up. So today I am going to be doing mini reviews for all of the books that I read in the final month of 2016. I read a grand total of 9 things in December. That is 3 trade paperbacks, comic bind-ups, and then 6 full novels, which overall I think finishing off the year was a pretty good number. I was also dealing with finals, so really any amount of stuff read, I'm impressed by. But anyway, I just want to jump right in so I can talk about the things that I read in the month of December. The very first thing that I read in the month of December was The Cuckoos Calling by Robert Galbraith, aka J.K. Rowling. This is actually the first book of J.K. Rowling's that I have read that isn't Harry Potter. I decided I really wanted to try out some of her other books. It didn't really go well for me. The Cuckoos Calling is the first in a mystery series, the Cormoran Strike series. It follows a main character named Cormoran Strike who is a private detective. The other character is a woman named Robin who originally comes to work for Cormoran as sort of a temp secretary, but then ends up sort of becoming his Watson in a lot of ways. At the beginning of the book, this guy comes in to try to hire Cormoran Strike. He is the brother of a model who everyone has assumed killed herself, but the brother thinks there's a lot more to it, and he wants Cormoran to solve the mystery. I had a lot of real problems with this book, and they are problems that I have noted in other stuff that J.K. Rowling has written, but that just became much more apparent in something that I have no emotional connection to at all. Every single woman in this entire book came across as such a stereotype. And even Robin, who I think had a lot of potential as a character, was severely underused and became nothing more than another reason for Cormoran to think that all women would fall in love with him. Like, he's a total mess and he consistently makes really bad decisions and is really rude to a lot of women, all in the attempt to fend them all off because they all want him for no reason that I can really understand. Not only that, but there is a character in this book who is supposed to be a male fashion designer and we are clearly supposed to read him as gay. But instead of just saying that, J.K. Rowling spends pages and pages of coming up with the most cliched movements possible that this character can make to really make the reader understand this guy is gay. Do you get it? First he pranced, then he did a little twirly movement with his hips. Isn't he so camp? Like, everything she said made me so furious, and when I was reading that chapter, I actually had to set it aside because I have already been upset with how J.K. Rowling represents queer characters in general, and so to finally see a queer character be queer on the page that J.K. Rowling wrote, and to have it be that stereotyped and terrible, made me furious. Also, really hated the end of this mystery, and I don't think it was a great pull-off feat considering how much time we had spent gathering clues up to that point, and overall I gave this book 2 stars, and I will not be continuing on with the rest of the Cormoran Strike series. The next book that I want to talk about is You Know Me Well by Nina LaCour and David Levithan. This is a YA contemporary with a cast made up of entirely queer characters. Everybody. It takes place over the week of Pride in San Francisco, and it is about these 2 people, specifically Kate and Mark. They've gone to school together, but they don't really know one another, and then they happen to run into each other at a gay bar the first night of Pride and become really close really fast because they are both going through a lot of stuff. Kate is having a hard time deciding what she's going to do with her future, and Mark is having a hard time because he is desperately in love with his best friend and doesn't really know how to deal with that. This was one of my most anticipated releases of the year, but besides that, it is also one of the nominees for the LGBTQIA+ category in the YA BookTube Awards, which I will leave a link to down in the description below so you can learn more. I am a judge for that category, and our live show is going to be on the 28th. We will be discussing this book as well as We Are the Ants by Sean David Hutchinson and If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo. So if you are interested to hear a bunch of us judges talk about those 4 books, all information about that will be down below. As a sort of sneak peek into my feelings on the book, I didn't really like it. I thought it was trying very, very hard to be deep and meaningful, and I kind of didn't need that out of this book. It seemed like a lot of the time was spent going for prose and meaningful big statements instead of character development. But overall, I just wanted something easy and happy and gay, and I wanted these 2 queer people to be able to meet and talk and be happy, and instead I think it was aiming way too high and trying to do way too much and that made me not like any of the characters, and it made me not find any of the characters really realistic. My favorite part about the book was the depiction of pride and the depiction of queer spaces as safe spaces. I loved that and the emphasis on that, especially at the beginning, but unfortunately, so much of this book was such a letdown and Manic Pixie Dream Girl love interest that I just kept waiting to get better. So overall, I gave this book a very, very unfortunate 2.5 out of 5 stars. Next up, we've got Lumberjanes Volume 4 by Noelle Stevenson, Shannon Waters, Grace Ellis, and Brooke A. Allen. This is the 4th volume in the Lumberjanes comic series. I actually reread the first 3 volumes first. Janelle owns all of the Lumberjanes in single issue, so I reread the first 3 volumes and then read the 4th volume. The 4th volume makes up issues 14, 15, 16, and 17 if we are going in single issue. Basically, the series is about this group of girls who goes up to this summer camp and they get into all sorts of fantastical, mystical adventures. Of the 5 female camper main characters, 2 are queer women and 1 is a trans woman. Multiple characters are people of color, and in general, it is just an ultra-inclusive, mega fun journey. I have consistently adored the Lumberjanes. I think that it is unabashedly positive, especially girl positive. Each individual female character gets so much attention and love, and it doesn't need to be gritty for the sake of grit. Instead, it goes to the opposite end of the spectrum, and it embraces positivity for the sake of wanting to be positive. I love everything about this series and consistently will love everything about this series, and this is actually also one of the graphic novels I will be talking about in the graphic novel YA BookTube Awards live show, which is on the 22nd. Again, I will leave that down below, and for that live show we will be discussing Lumberjanes Volume 4, Giant Days Volume 2, and Paper Girls Volume 1. So if you want to hear more of my thoughts and some of the other judges' thoughts on those, again, information in the description below, but overall I gave this volume, as I have given the previous ones, pretty solid 5 out of 5 stars. I also read Giant Days Volume 1 in December. This comic series is by John Allison and Lissa Trayman, right? And it was really, really fun. I didn't know pretty much anything about Giant Days going in, but what really excites me is that it is a comic series about this group of 3 girls at university. It's British, so they are at university, and I am constantly trying to find new books that take place in college or that are about characters just starting out into adulthood, because that's the point I am in my life. So this was really fun. The comic series doesn't really feature connected storylines so much as just it follows these 3 girls that live next to one another, their first year of college, how they've become friends, and the stuff that they go through. It is super smart and fast. I love how quippy it is. I love how funny it can be at times. And one of the main characters is queer. Excited to see where that goes. But I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I cannot wait to continue in the series. I thought it was so much fun and such a new comic series to read. So very excited to have started this one. The next book that I read is actually the first book that I started by the time I got home, and that is What Light by Jay Asher. This is a YA contemporary that takes place around the Christmas season. It follows a girl named Sierra. She lives in Oregon and she grew up on a Christmas tree farm. And then every year on Thanksgiving, her and her family drive down to California and they open up a Christmas tree lot. And they've been doing this Sierra's entire life. Unfortunately, it seems like this year, her junior year in high school, it might be the last time they get to open this Christmas tree lot. But also this year she meets a boy named Caleb with a past that people do not speak highly of, and she just wants to understand more of where he comes from and how he has changed because of this. This is sort of a story about love, but it is also about a lot of redemption, and ultimately it reads a little bit like a Hallmark movie, which if you like Christmas Hallmark movies, then it works for you, I'm sure, and it did work for me because I love Christmas Hallmark movies. This definitely isn't the sort of book that I would usually read, but I wound up enjoying it in its sort of cheese, its emotional dramatics, and even in its sentimentality. So I wound up giving this about a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was just a really fun book to read around Christmas, and so I enjoyed it, despite the fact that it is definitely not something that I would usually pick up. The next book that I read was The Lost Hero by Rick Riordan. This is the first book in the Heroes of Olympus series, which I have finally now started. Over the summer, I reread the Percy Jackson series, which I haven't read since junior high, in preparation for going into this series. series, and it was definitely a fun ride, but not one that I enjoyed nearly as much as I have liked the Percy Jackson series, which I'm sure might change going forward. This book begins, I want to say, about 6 or so months after the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series ends. And it is narrated by 3 characters, Jason, Piper, and Leo. What is wonderful about this series is that Jason, Piper, and Leo are each point of view characters. We get to switch back and forth between each of them narrating. And while Jason is the traditional straight white male lead, Piper's father is Native American, which she talks about a lot. It is a big thing for her to discuss how that has affected how she's grown up. And Leo is actually Latino, and it's just so exciting, especially because I know down the road there is also a queer relationship. I know it's way down the road, but I'm really excited to get there because I'm just really happy that this book has a significantly more diverse cast than the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series did, and I know that Rick Riordan continues to make his books more diverse as we've moved forward, and that makes me very happy. But the main thing that starts us out in this book is that Jason wakes up on a bus and he has no memory of who he is, and everyone around him is telling him that he's been there for a while. They don't know why he doesn't remember anything, and then of course, Greek mystery stuff ensues. My main problem was that I didn't quite get to know the characters as well in this story. I didn't love them as much as I've loved some of the characters in Percy Jackson thus far. However, I could see myself really loving them moving forward. I think Leo is my favorite character in this book, and I think Piper has a lot of potential to grow, so I'm excited to continue with the Heroes of Olympus series and to see where these characters go on from there, and to see what's going to happen with this next big prophecy with the 7 demigods, because I want to know who the other 4 are. Alright, I kind of know who the other 4 are, but I'm excited for them to show up. And in the end, I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. After that, I picked up More Than This by Patrick Ness. This was one of the books on my top 16 to read in 2016 list for good reason. I adore Patrick Ness, and this is one of the books that comes most highly recommended by him. This book is sort of vague in summary, but I think that's what makes it work. In the very first chapter, our main character dies, he drowns, and then he wakes up in what sort of seems like the Upside Down in Stranger Things. It's kind of got that vibe. So we begin with him dying and move on from there. This book is pretty sci-fi based, and I don't read a lot of sci-fi, so that was interesting for me. Also, the main character is gay, and that becomes a pretty big plotline moving into the book. I loved so much about this, and it was the most enthusiastic I've been about reading a book in a couple of months. I was just tearing through it. It was new and interesting, and there were so many beautiful quotes, and Seth as a character, on a lot of occasions, I connected to him incredibly deeply. The one problem I had with this book was that I don't really like the ending. I kind of can't deal with ambiguity when I'm reading a book. If it's going to end, I kind of need definitive answers, and this doesn't really offer any. So without that ending, this would have easily been a 5-star read. I just adored it. Unfortunately, with that ending, I had to knock it down to a 4-star read, but I still adored this book. And I just so appreciate Patrick Ness's writing because this was incredibly impressive. At the end of the year, the holiday booktubeathon started. I was supposed to read like 4 things. Instead, I read 2, but that's just what happens. If you're interested in watching my holiday booktubeathon vlog, that went up yesterday. I will leave a link on the screen, but the first thing that I read in the Holiday Booktubeathon was Saga Volume 3. Saga is a comic series. It is sort of a space adventure. It is about this place. There is a planet and a moon, Landfall and Wreath, and the inhabitants of both of these planets are at war, and then the main characters, one from Landfall, one from Wreath, fall in love, which is not acceptable because they're at war, and then they also have a kid, and that is mega not okay, because if these people can get along, then how are they going to keep this war going? It is a space adventure. It is about them. It is about them being hunted down by a variety of assassins or bounty hunters, and it's just so much fun. This volume in particular also introduced a gay couple, this gay alien reporter couple that was just fantastic. I loved them. I loved the expansion of particularly these 2 characters that are on the front. I don't really want to explain too much who they are, but their characters as they've continued to grow along with the growth of the Will as a character has been so much fun to watch. Plus, of course, I love the main characters, the central couple and the daughter. They've really just been a lot of fun to watch. This was a great addition to the series. just like Lumberjanes, I continue to really enjoy this one, and I gave this a 4.5 stars. And the final book that I read this year, as well as the final book that I read for the holiday BookTubeathon, was Blink by Ted Dekker. If you have watched any of my last few videos, you know that I absolutely hated this book. This is about a guy named Seth. He is incredibly intelligent. He has one of the highest IQs the world has ever known, and then suddenly he gets the ability to see multiple potential futures. It is also about a woman named Miriam. She is a Saudi Arabian princess on the run from an arranged marriage. I've talked a lot about what is wrong with this book. Without getting specific, it is Islamophobic, it has a severe misrepresentation of Muslim women, it is misogynistic, fatphobic, and a variety of other things along the way. But the main thing that I want to talk about is the fact that I have said that I like Ted Dekker's writing. I have said that in the past, and Ted Dekker, I want to say now, is a Christian author. And the reason that I have read his books in the past is because I grew up in a place where I was incredibly surrounded by Christianity in general. And so when I started reading his other thrillers, there would be threads and an emphasis on religion, but it was something that I didn't really notice because it became so ingrained in where I had grown up and the life that I was living. However, I have not read a Ted Dekker book in a few years now, probably since before I went to college, and this is the first one that I've picked up after a few years of being away from this place that I've grown up in, and in a place where I'm more willing to recognize what's happening in books like this. Ted Dekker uses this entire story as a way for Seth, the American character, to teach Miriam that her religion is incorrect. He uses his predictions of the future to prove that the Christian God is the one true God, and that Miriam, as a Muslim, is believing the incorrect things, which is a really terrible premise for a story, honestly. But beyond that, reading this made me realize the things that I had been blind to in my younger years, reading Ted Dekker, the things that I have problems with him, and because I gave this book 1 out of 5 stars, and because of the amount of respect that I have lost for him, I've also decided to get rid of the remainder of my Ted Dekker books. I had a lot of them, but I've decided to move past that, and they will all be going away, and I will not be promoting his books on my channel from now on. Okay guys, there you go. That is my December wrap-up. I know I got a little bit negative there at the end, but I really felt like I needed to offer as much detail as possible on my feelings with Ted Dekker because I have such a history with his writing. I didn't want it to be written off as that was my first book by him or anything like that. I wanted to really emphasize how I have come to understand Ted Dekker as a writer, especially as a Christian writer. I don't really read religious books especially anymore, so that just made this even more apparent. I'm still talking about it. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed my December wrap-up. I hope that you enjoyed hearing some of my thoughts about these books. If you have read any of these books and you would like to share your opinions on them, please do so in the comments below, or let me know what some of the books you read were this December. What did you enjoy? What didn't you enjoy? I hope that you had a wonderful 2016, and I hope that you finished off the year in a way that made you happy with your reading experiences in general. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!